Today we will discuss a bicycle infrastructure project that is interesting not only by itself, but also because of the history of its creation. In particular, we will talk about the Nordbahntrasse bicycle path in the German city of Wuppertal. And, as you might guess from its name, it's somehow connected with the railway. How exactly, you will know in a few minutes. Wuppertal is a strong industrial city in the North Rhine-Westphalia region, which is known to transport fans mostly for its unique Schwebebahn suspension railway. In general, this city can hardly be called a cycling paradise. It is quite car-oriented, its bicycle infrastructure is far from perfection, and the picture is complemented by a quite hilly terrain. Wuppertal is located in the hilly valley of the Wupper River, so there are descents and ascents everywhere, and all the flat areas along the banks are built up very densely. That's why the 23-kilometer-long bicycle route that stretches continuously through the city was a very important improvement, and for its construction they used the remains of the abandoned Rhinish or Northern Railway. Here we have to take a few steps back to understand how the abandoned railroad appeared in the city. The city of Wuppertal itself is quite young. It was formed only in 1929 by merging towns of Barmen, Elberfeld and several others. But the railroad in the area was developed long before that. In 1841 was launched a 27-kilometer rail line between Elberfeld, now it is one of the districts of Wuppertal, and Düsseldorf, which was running through a valley along the Wupper River. But this line had one big problem. There was a very steep ascent near the Erkrath station. Over a distance of 2.5 kilometers, the tracks gained 82 meters of height, and for 100 years it was the steepest climb on the main line in all of Europe. The locomotives of that time were not able to climb this hill. At first they were pulled up by cables and stationary steam engine, and later they began to use an additional locomotive for this purpose. Looking at these problems, the competing railway company REG, Rheinisch Eisenbahn-Gesellschaft, built an alternative line with gentler climbs on the opposite northern hillsides, which was launched in 1879 and called the Rhine Line. It passed through a very difficult terrain with a whole bunch of tunnels and long viaducts. In fact, the new line consisted almost entirely of them, with only short sections running right on the ground. But the plan didn't work. The problems with the ascent on the old line were solved by more powerful locomotives and later by the electrification of the railway. The main rail traffic still went through the old branch of Wupper Valley, which had more space for trains to pass and to stop. So from the very beginning the newer Rhine Line was in the older line's shadow and was used only for freight transit and some local passenger trains. But the passenger trains that were operated there were slow and attracted very few passengers. For example, the train from Wuppertal-Wichlinghausen to Düsseldorf took 70 minutes. At the same time, from the Wuppertal Oberbarmen station, which is only a 5-minute walk from Wichlinghausen, Düsseldorf could be reached in 35 minutes by a local train and 25 minutes by regional express. In the 1960s and 70s there were several attempts to electrify the Rhine Line, but these plans were not realized. Nevertheless, the Rhine Line was used for more than 100 years. But in September 1991, finally passenger trains stopped operating there, and soon after that regular freight traffic stopped as well. From time to time, only a few freight trains used the track to approach local industries, but even that stopped in the 2000s. And it is rumored that the railway company intentionally overcharged for the use of the tracks in order to speed up the closure and avoid spending money on their maintenance. After that, some of the tracks were dismantled, the tunnels were bricked up, and for several decades the tracks of the Rhine Line were abandoned and overgrown with the trees, and the roots gradually destroyed the masonry of bridges and retaining walls. In 2005, an initiative group of local residents led by Karsten Gerhardt united around the idea of turning the abandoned tracks into a bicycle and pedestrian route. The idea was very promising because the tracks of the Rhine Line stretched across the city, passing through various residential areas and next to the parks, and didn't intersect with the traffic at all. Creation of a bicycle route on the railroad side would allow safe and fast commuting around the city without a car and would also help to preserve the old railway viaducts, which were very important for the overall image of the city. In February 2006, they established the non-profit organization Wuppertal Nordbahntrasse, which was supposed to deal with this project. And a few months later, they presented their economic calculations to the public, according to which the project was supposed to cost about 16 million euros. They were very active in communicating with the residents, media and the city authorities, and as a result, the public's attitude was very positive. The city authorities also took the project positively, although they immediately noted that the city has no money for its implementation. But the activists didn't give up and launched a campaign to raise donations from local residents and companies and began looking for national and European grants to finance the project. In this way, they managed to raise 3.3 million euros, which allowed them to start works. In 2007, citizens organized a large campaign to clean up overgrown tracks, and volunteers also built a 200 meters test section near the Wichlinghausen station to show how the future bicycle path would look like. In 2008, the city received funding from the state for the first part of the route. Next year, the Wuppertaler Bewegung set up a daughter company, Wuppertal Nordbahntrasse GmbH, which was supposed to manage the construction and operation of the bike route for the next 20 years. However, the city administration demanded that all tenders must be proceeded in the same way as it does the city itself. And in the same year, the rail tracks were purchased from its former owner for 2.2 million euros, allowing construction work to begin. In 2010, in just a few weeks, they've built the first 2.5 kilometers of the route between Wuppertal Road and Osterbaum. It is interesting to know that about 100 workers were sent to the construction by the local employment center, and it was a part of their retraining. But once the stage was completed, problems began to arise. The city administration decided to review how well the public management company had managed the construction and hired a third-party engineering company to do so, which found serious procurement errors. Representatives of Nordbahntrasse GmbH denied this, but as a result, the city refused to give them other sites to work on and decided to build next stages by itself. Moreover, the first construction works showed that the actual costs were much higher than the project estimates. As a result, the width of the path was reduced from 6 to 4 meters in some later sections, and no separate areas for pedestrians and cyclists were created, which led to a growing disagreement between the city authorities and the project initiators. But despite all the disagreements, in the following years construction continued. At the final stage in 2014, the city reconstructed the viaducts and the Engelberg tunnel, and at the end of the year the bicycle route was fully open to pedestrians and cyclists. The total cost of construction amounted to about 32 million euros, 80% of which were financed by the federal government and the European Union, and the remaining 20 were covered by donations. At the same time, the initial cost of the project was estimated at 16 million euros, and the main reasons for this increase were the bridges and tunnels that needed restoration and reinforcement. And this is not surprising, because in general there are 6 tunnels along the route with a total length of 2 kilometers and 23 bridges and viaducts, the longest of which is 280 meters. Notably, the tunnels have also become the subject of intense debates about animal protection, as they were home to a large population of bats. As a result, it was decided not to use one of the tunnels and leave it for nature. Since then, Nordbahntrasse has become one of the city's most popular recreational areas and a site for various events. The route passes through densely populated areas, and there are about 100,000 people living along it, so it is also an important urban mainline. The viaducts now offer great panoramic views of the city, and some bridges have become famous Instagram locations. Also, most of the path passes through green areas, so cycling here is very pleasant and also easy because there is no steep slopes. There are many schools nearby, and now school children can safely get to them on bicycles using Nordbahntrasse without crossing streets with the cars. Along the path have been set up playgrounds and recreational areas, and railway station buildings have been transformed into cafes, restaurants and community centers. But in my opinion, the most important thing is a large community of active citizens that formed around this project, who who have always responded whenever they needed to do something with their own hands. And also more than 50 local companies that joined the support of the project either by donating money or by their own labor. Overall, this is a great example of how a citizens' initiative can become the start of a major project for a city.